Well, good morning to all, and good afternoon or good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. I'm Evan Feigenbaum. On screen with me is my co-founder, Alyona Popova, and this
everybody.
And this is the launch of Art MISTICE, an exciting and we think pioneering digital art and peace-building initiative grounded in the belief that in an era of seemingly endless wars and radical division, it is art, and particularly co-created art, that can help to rehumanize, reconnect, and rebuild. And I want to pause on that word for a moment, co-creation, because it's at the core of what this initiative, Art MISTICE, is all about. The world is being shaped by the realities of war and forced migration. Millions are being uprooted from their homes and lives torn apart. And inevitably, that causes incredible suffering at a very human level, pain for millions and collective trauma in societies. And there's a long and venerable tradition of artists expressing the pain of war, the pain that they and their fellow citizens feel amid war, displacement, and suffering. But there are two sides to a conflict, and there is so much pain, frankly, too much pain, to go around. I'm a former diplomat, and I've negotiated in some tough situations with some pretty awful characters. And when you're a diplomat, you can get the fighting to stop. An armistice can be declared. Diplomats sign papers and broker ceasefires, make treaties, but this never yields true peace, because we don't get to peace only when fighting stops. We get to peace when there's reconciliation, which in turn requires empathy. It requires a recognition that while one side of a conflict has suffered, human beings on the other side have experienced pain too. So this cultural project, Art MISTICE, is about sharing pain in an effort to build empathy. We believe that if art powerfully expresses pain, then co-created art by artists from both sides of a conflict can help to build the empathy needed for an elusive peace. And that's what we launched today with a stellar group of digital and traditional artists, curators, and peace builders. And I want to stop for just one more moment on that word too, digital, because Art MISTICE will be built around an art residency for digital artists from opposing sides of conflicts that lets them co-create and then exhibits their powerful works of co-created digital art globally. Digital art is a fresh medium. It speaks to younger generations. It can be seen by anyone, including in conflict zones, not just those lucky enough to visit a museum. But above all, the digital space has become an arena for propaganda and hate speech that fuels conflicts. So we want to work with digital artists to reclaim the digital space for empathy and co-creation, rather than the hate speech that too often undermines peace-building efforts. Art MISTICE is not about words, it's about art and action. And so I'm going to hand the platform now to my co-founder, Alyona, to talk about a few of those next actions. Alyona?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alyona Popova. So originally I'm from Russia, and now I'm in exile. I have 2 degrees in law and in journalism, and I have a lot of passion about art and in art, especially in digital domain. So as you've just heard, Art MISTICE is about creating space for peace for digital art. And we're not just about words. We are about the collective, creative, and the real actions. So let me just describe you what we having in our mind what will come next after this event, because this event is just the only first step, and the real actions will be done like afterwards. And thank you for participation in our initiative. So first, we have an Art Mistis manifesto. So you see this QR code on your screen. You can use it, read it, and sign it. And this is more than just a text. It's our statement of principles. And it is also a creative tool that we are going to use. We want it to become something that artists work with, share with, and refer to. This is highly important and essential. So we want a manifesto to be not just a declaration. Again, this is very important, but I would say sexy and fashionable and viral, and be the visible cultural object itself that maybe some artists can take and spread across many platforms, communities, and artworks. That's what we are going to do. And we invite everyone here to take this first step again, scan the QR code on your screen, read it and sign it, and maybe help us to spread it everywhere, and maybe through your social media too. And also today we are launching our media campaign with a special hashtag, Digital Art Peacebuilding. Peacebuilding, like, it's the most important part, as Evan mentioned before. And why do we want to do that? So digital art, as Evan said, is the way to build bridges, to unite people, not just divide us, everybody. Now everybody hates everybody. So we would like to change it. And that's why we would like to form and formulate and spread the new narrative. It is very hard, as you know, through social media and through internet, but again, it's essential and important for that project, and I assume for the world too. So why we think it will work, this digital campaign? When I was in Russia, we created a lot of narrative that changed people's attitude toward violence. So we launched a lot of digital campaigns, and we collected more than 1 million people to sign our petitions, to participate in our social media stuff. And I strongly believe that it will work now with this new narrative, again, digital art Peacebuilding. And our second step is our Art Mistis Community Fund, or DAF, built on endowment. Maybe many of you know what it is. So this fund is here to ensure that Art Mistis isn't a one-time event, not just this event that we have with us, with you now, but a sustainable, independent, and community-driven project. So as Evan highlighted a few words, I want to highlight community-driven fund. So we invite digital artists and anyone who believes in peace through art to donate to this fund. Why? Because donating is also a performance itself. I know it by my own experience. I'm donating to many initiatives, and this is how I say, yes, I stand against any war and hate, against violence. And yes, I believe in co-creation over any destruction. So through this fund, we will support Art Mistis residences, art humanitarian initiatives in different countries. I assume so, I hope so. And projects that focus on peace building through digital co-creation. And again, I would like to highlight a few principles in our manifesto. Speed, this is important. We act fast when it matters a lot. We co-create, this is the foundation of our project. We are advocating for the collective actions. Again, this is highly important. And we are going to have an impact. We aim to change narratives and not just to comment on them or to follow the existing ones. So again, we live in digital cultural diplomacy, as you are here with us. Thank you so much. And you're on stage now.
So everyone, let's get to work. And as Alyona just said, we want Artmistice to be about real actions by real artists in the real world aimed at building real peace. And so I can't tell you how excited we are to have 4 such artists with us now to essentially tell us their stories. And we're going to take about 20 minutes to do so. We want to hear how they did it, what they learned, but especially what we can learn as we swing into this initiative. First, Abul Oye Deng and Jacob Bulbour founded what's called the Anataban Collective in South Sudan. Anataban means we are tired. And so they paint peace on broken walls. They turn trauma into murals and ultimately into hope. Manali Jagtap is an Indian artist who founded Artraker. It's a foundation that creates space for shared stories in countries torn apart by war and violence. And she's an artist too, so her own multimedia art brings people together across borders. And then Bjorn Ehler is with us and is working with us in the project, but he's waylaid this morning at the Norwegian Parliament. So he recorded a video earlier this morning to join us. He survived a terror attack in Norway, and now he listens to extremists in an effort to disarm hate from the inside out. So Abul and Jacob, I want to start with you. And I know you're joining us from Juba and from Nairobi. And as we titled this panel, we want you to tell us your story. So take about 7 or 8 minutes and tell us your story. Abul, you want to start?
I think Bull will start, but thank you.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll sure. I'll start from there. Thank you, Evans. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I know we have a lot of time difference, though it's a small world. We can virtually meet and get to see each other. I'm Jacob Bull. A co-founder of Anataban Art Initiative. My background is actually public policy, but I'm also an actor. So that is who I am. And as you introduced it clearly, Evans, I'm a co-founder of Anataban Art Initiative. So I'll talk about how we came about Anataban, and Bull will pick up on some of the things that we have done with Anataban, the art activities that we have done in Juba, knowing that we are in a closed space civically. If all of you understand the status of South Sudan in terms of the civic space, it's pretty much closed. Anataban started in 2016 when the civil war started again at the presidential palace. We had the first conflict that started in 2013, but then a peace deal was signed in 2015. But in 2016, there was another fighting at the presidential palace, and we felt our political elites do not understand the suffering that they're subjecting our people into. So we decided as a group of artists, musicians, virtual art, actors, film directors, and all that to come together and try to utilize our influence under one umbrella on how to speak on issues of concern in the country. And more so, what we wanted to accomplish was that we create this platform for the ordinary citizen of South Sudan to be able to speak up and be heard on the issues that are affecting them. We were tired of the killing. We were tired of the suffering that the citizens of South Sudan are being subjected to. So we decided that let's establish this platform, Anataban, to be an avenue for the South Sudanese young creatives to be able to speak on issues of concern in the country. We saw that most of our young people were being recruited into the military, and they were just dying aimlessly, not knowing what they're even fighting for. Yet this was just a necessary conflict that brothers are fighting themselves, that political classes are just fighting themselves in order to be part of the government. So we decided, how do we utilize our influence to speak to our young generation, our young colleagues, not to be able to join these fightings. And that was one of the major objectives as to why we formed Anataban. But the other thing was also to leave youth voices through art and encourage them to develop mutual understanding among communities, because there was widespread of use of hate speech. Communities are called names and all that. So we were trying to find ways and find a platform that would bring these young people together to be able to actually push back on this propaganda, the use of propaganda and use of hate speech on social media, calling each other names, calling each other derogative words and all that. So and also to cultivate that spirit of patriotism and nationhood in our young generation, and knowing that we were not able, most of us were not able to speak on their own and put up writings or maybe go on social media as individuals. We decided that let's have this as a collective that brings us together, and we speak with one voice, that this is what we stand for as creatives of South Sudan. So that is how Anataban came about. And we also came up with about 6 values that we felt, we felt like they resonate with our initiative. And one was being in solidarity with the suffering population of our country, our younger brothers, our sisters of South Sudan that were facing and they're being marginalized on so many ways. The other was, taking courage, speaking up. And as much as we know the civic space is closed, we said, we ought to have some courage to speak up on these issues. If we don't talk about them, then nobody will speak up on the issues that we are facing as a country. And we also brought in the value of integrity. We said Anataban, promote transparency and accountability. We can see things being messed and we don't talk about them. So, and that includes, issues of governance, issues of justice, issues of accountability, and all that. So we said that is one of the things that we will put as our values. And the other one was on nonviolence. We said Anataban stand for peaceful activism and believe violence is the solution to any problem in South Sudan. We encourage dialogue among communities, among individuals, among the political elites, and all of you in the country. We are against violence in any form. And we said we were not politically aligned to anybody. In South Sudan, in most cases, when you're speaking up on issues of the ongoing conflict, you are easily branded as being from a certain political group, or you are supporting a certain political agenda. But we said we were not politically aligned. So the initiative started and we launched it in Kenya back then because we had no free space to do that in South Sudan. So we decided to come together as young creatives from South Sudan to come and form the initiative in Kenya, but then went back home and launched it. And the number really grew so fast that we started off with some of the activities that I'll give Abul the chance to speak on. That is it for now. Abul, take up the space.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone. Greetings to you. My name is Abul Oyaideng. I'm an artist. I come from a background of revolutionaries. All my parents, fought in this liberation for South Sudan, and we lived through wars. And art for me is, it's personal healing, much as it's talent. It was a way of communicating. And I mean, when we started Anataban in 2016, it was a lot of things, Bullets talked about, and, being a universal language. I remember the time we would go on the streets of Juba and, painting these art pieces. And a lot of time people would come together and ask, questions of, I mean, they would look at the paintings and they basically relate to them. So we didn't have to South Sudan we've got about 64 ethnic groups and so many different dialects and languages, but art was one thing that united us, through music, paintings on the wall, and it just brought everybody together, and easy way to communicate and express how we felt, seeing all these things that were going on. If you turn on the news today, you think the world is falling apart. It's so easy to get angry for picking sides and things like that. But how do we, what art is the only way that we can express ourselves, without it, and especially in South Sudan, it's difficult to just go on the streets and march and protest and things like that. So art is almost like a silent way of, protest for us, and communicating to the authority. And some of the things we did here was, we had shows, like street shows, where we had to go to different places in Juba, and we set up like theaters, concerts, and this was easy way for us to bring in the youth and just share with them, and for them as well to come together and express how they feel. So yeah, I mean, as an artist, I don't have much to say. It's usually canvas. So
That's great. Thanks. And it's incredibly powerful, actually, especially because it's a form of protest and expression where more conventional and traditional forms of protest and expression are not available.
Yeah, just to add on that, sorry. I hope our time is not up yet.
Just about, and then I'm going to go to Manali, but please say what you're going to say.
All right. Yes. I mean, it's just a few things that I will add to that. After the launch and doing the murals in Juba, and striking conversations in buses and all over the streets of Juba, we also started out with campaigns. We had our first campaign was the Bloodshed Free 2017 that we did online, and we did events on the streets and neighborhoods of Juba. We had also a campaign called South Sudan is Watching. This is a campaign that we started at the onset of the peace talk in 2017 to pressure the negotiating parties to be able to speak and deliberate on the issues of concern in South Sudan, the issues that are affecting South Sudanese, rather than looking at the negotiation as a way of giving themselves position. So this is one of the campaign, and we also started off one of the biggest festival in South Sudan called the Hagana Festival, which is Hagana is an Arabic word for hours. So we were urging the young people to take up the ownership of the country and take up responsibility, put in their role on what they think they can do for the country, and also hold the people accountable, those who are supposed to do things that basically provision of services to the people. So I'll stop there.
Great. Manali, can you tell us your story a little bit?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope everyone can hear me well. Fantastic. Well, I've come here to talk about Artraker. So Artraker was set up as the home for conflict art and artists in 2013. I had just finished my post-graduation in art and politics from Goldsmiths University when I embarked on a journey to bring to life a bold vision where I wanted to see actual impact, change, empathy, dialogue, and co-creation, and give artists and organizations working in the space of conflict art a mainstream podium. At that time, the key driver for us was to inject some creativity back into the peacemaking and peace-building process. Work that is often difficult, process, and statistic-driven, and where imagination, innovation, and co-creation is so key and is lacking. We believed and we were convinced that linking conflict artists with peacemakers and builders helps us to do better peace work. Now, what is conflict art? I would define conflict art as art that shapes how people and organizations understand, engage, and respond to conflicts. Now, this shaping may or may not be conscious. Sometimes it's just a reaction to what the artist has observed and or experiences. It involves aesthetic decisions that, in my view, are fundamentally political. Generating ideas and affecting perceptions is powerful and political. Sometimes these decisions are rooted in a decision to do something, about contradicting dominant narratives and coming out with counter narratives. At that point, Artraker was the only award of its kind in the world. It differed from other awards, such as the Turner Prize and others. Although, like them, Artraker awarded contemporary art, it was not primarily interested in the significance of the artist's contribution to the disciplines, for example, photography, painting, but was focused instead on the ability of the art to create opportunities for change and to co-create experiences of freedom, even in the midst of conflict. Well, Artraker name came from President Theodore Roosevelt from muckrakers, basically. Muckrakers were adversarial journalists who investigated and published reports on social issues that led to change. And Artraker, therefore, was an apt name for the home for transformative conflict art. Art that challenges our narratives of violence and social upheaval and has the power to inspire new ways of making peace. So over years, our mission grew. We focused on shaping how people and organizations understand, engage, and respond to conflict. We know that art can inform and influence in ways that dry materials or statistics just cannot. And our aim was to reawaken and reconnect people with their basic humanity. This is why we provided this platform, to showcase and amplify the work of conflict artists from across the world and support exposure of these artworks to a wide variety of audiences. We launched the Art of Peace exhibition that brought the most impactful conflict artworks on a traveling exhibition from east to west. The aim was to foster exchange between artists and peace builders, to provoke dialogue and debate, to inspire, to empower, and to highlight the challenges of building peace to national and international audiences. So our first year saw submissions from 300 artists from 90 countries. And we reached our third year, we received over 1,000 entries. We curated and presented awards in London, in UK, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Valletta in Malta. And a cash prize was given to winners to amplify and to continue their art projects. One of the examples is Refugee Street Studio project by artist Alexia Webster from South Africa. She was our first Artraker winner in 2013. Now, the idea was simple, yet extraordinarily powerful. In the midst of displacement, where much has been lost, enabling individuals to reclaim family and community was an important contribution to recovery, healing, and hope. Now, the project involved creating photographic portrait studios on the streets of refugee and IDP camps around the world. Exiled from home, facing an uncertain future and a lost past, a family photo can be a powerful and precious object, which can help a sense of connectedness and belonging. The project invited anyone to come and have their family and individual photos taken. They dressed up their best. They brought along with them items that they had brought from home. The studio was set up, photos taken, and then printed on site for free with a portable photo printer for people to take home. This project was awarded and we amplified it and reached more than 100,000 refugees. A moment of hope, belonging, and healing was created with this powerful project. And I'll leave you with another one, which is, again, a beautiful project. It was called Recycling Myanmar's Dignity. It was a grassroots art project by the late Sanzao Hathaway. He was held a political prisoner from 1999 to 2012 in the Irrawaddy prison in Myanmar. He created collages using materials from the prison's garbage and exchanged food and rations with guards to obtain prohibited items like scissors and glue. His work is a reflection of his experience in prison and his desire to self-express in the face of extreme deprivation. He wanted to raise awareness about the lives of political prisoners in Myanmar and to prove that torture, violence, and oppression can break a person's body, but cannot take away the spirit within. As an art counselor, he traveled around the country to teach children and other people affected by poverty, war, and ethnic discrimination how to create art as a means of reclaiming their right to express themselves. He taught people to use art to release hardships, open up to dreams, and visualize peace by using recycled materials like food wrappers, cake boxes, plastic bags. He promoted environmental sustainability and access to art to all. The artist utilized his experience as a free man, teaching art by using recycled material as symbolic of restored dignity. As our current world is now inherently living in the virtual world, where majority of the dialogues take place online, where hatred spews and human emotions are so desensitized, I feel Art Mistis is a timely intervention that takes place in this digital world, fostering co-creation and empathy. And I'm very much looking forward to being part of their journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Manali.
Thank you, Manali. You're such an inspiration.
Thank you. As I said earlier, Bjorn got waylaid this morning, but he recorded a video since he wasn't able to join us. So we're going to run that video now.
Hi, artists. I'm so sorry I can't be there in time, but I recorded this for you all. I think it's incredibly important what you're doing, bringing art and peacebuilding together. Myself, I've been working on this for years. In 2011, I survived a terrorist attack here in Norway, and at the time I was studying theater and performance design and technology, and so I was getting a bachelor's degree in performing art. I very nearly got killed in the terrorist attack. I lost a lot of friends. I was suffering for a long time from post-traumatic stress disorder. And so going into the fall of 2011, I returned to my university to continue my art studies. And for me, that really became a tool for coping with what had happened to me. Throughout the year following the attack, I had the pleasure and privilege of working at the National Opera here in Norway, working on performances that really captured people dealing with the grief of the death of their friends. And for me, that became a vehicle for myself to understand some of the processes I was going through myself and reflect on that, but also to communicate that more widely. And so for that, art really became not just a means of expression, but also a tool for grappling with post-traumatic stress disorder and for grappling with my own emotional journey. The reason I started studying theater in the first place was my belief in storytelling for human connection. Following the terrorist attack, I started working on how we could work on peace processes and reconciliation processes to bring the tools that I knew of storytelling to conflict zones and to other people that have been going through various forms of trauma. And so it became important for me to try to facilitate and bring my tools to a wider community, and I believe that's what Art Mistis is trying to do. There's a whole host of different ways of doing that. For me, theater was one way. I know many visual artists, poets, etc. have been grappling with both their own experiences of conflict, but also trying to establish forms of communication across division lines. There's a lot of great artwork coming out of really difficult times, and a lot of artwork that also is developed by people to communicate with those we perceive to be our enemies. And I think in that there is beauty, but also the power to find new channels of communication, new channels of engagement and connection and reconciliation, both in terms of healing after war, but also in terms of establishing platforms for communication during war and conflict. The reason I can't be with you on the call today is that I'm at the Internet Governance Forum. I know Artmistice is looking into the ways in which we can use technology for creating new platforms for sharing art, but also for creating new art. Digital art being a key topic on the agenda. And so just wanted to say that we are also working very actively now with internet providers, with tech companies, and with the platforms that are supporting the dissemination of art, but also that are supporting spaces for communication across division lines. And so in that there is work to be done both on the regulatory side, which is why we're here, but also work to be done on the content side. And so it is important that artists continue to explore the tools that we have available, and that those tools remain available for us to use in order to express ourselves, in order to grapple with the experiences life throws at us, but also in order for us to create pathways for communication across division lines throughout the world. So through that, I hope we can find ways of using art, using storytelling, and using our more emerging technologies in order to build more peaceful and thriving societies. So sorry again for not being able to be there, and thank you very much for putting this together. I look forward to seeing what Artmistice brings next. Thank you.
Just a few remarks, guys. Thank you so much, ladies, guys, for being with us, and you're such an inspiration. But I want to highlight the word empathy and co-creation, 2 words. And I'm very grateful that you mentioned 2 of them. Like you said that co-creation is key, as well as empathy, that we just lost due to all this hatred and hate speech all over, and especially on internet. So here we are, and our next panel is coming.
So let me talk about what's coming. We have 2 exciting panels, one on art and empathy, and then a second on the power of the digital space. So this first panel, as I just said, is about how art can foster empathy and how empathy in turn can foster peace. So it's a panel about the raw power of artistic expression. And we have 1 peace builder, 2 extraordinary artists, and 1 curator to help us with that. Marina Pislakova-Parker is building peace between Russian and Ukrainian women right now in wartime. And despite facing online hate, she stands for dialogue and radical empathy. So she's a voice of real courage. A.L. Crego from Spain creates really hypnotic digital art that stirs the subconscious and invites us to feel together. His work is really a kind of poetic rebellion against apathy. And he's visually anonymous, so we won't have him, his visual on screen. Yu Yu from Taiwan transforms digital space into a kind of sanctuary for dialogue, not division. And his art, I think, listens It remembers, it reclaims. And then finally, Min Hyung Kang from Korea builds spaces from Seoul to Gwangju in the south, where artists and communities co-create the future. And her curations are very deeply human. They're technology infused, but they're also very tender. So Marina, we're gonna start with you because you're at the center of peace building. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit of your story about empathy and peacemaking.
Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations. This is really amazing project. And building on the previous panel, I think, as I was listening to all the presenters, things that come to my mind is that currently we live in a very strange world where words are so devalued. It's like really nice, good words that used to have power. They are now devalued, like human dignity, or why things are like why violence is really shouldn't be allowed, and it is human rights violation to perpetrate violence on one another. But still, we have so much of that in the world, and in most of my work, actually, most of my life was dedicated to working with violence against women and girls, and a lot of other related to that issue, harmful practices. So dealing with culture, dealing with a lot of root causes of violence. To be honest, all my life I tried to comprehend why do we have all of that, we as human beings. And what we in discussions in different professional places, discussions, we all talk about like why we cannot hear one another. And there are some real causes of that, because media, internet is so overwhelmed with violence, real violence that exists on earth at the moment. We have wars, we have over 100 countries that live with internal conflict today. We have a lot of human rights violation, we have violence, gender-based violence, women's rights violations. So we have a lot of that, and at the moment it becomes normalized in many ways. It's look at almost every society. There are radical groups that try to normalize or substitute issues, normalize use of violence, normalize violating each other. And how do we wake up? And that's where art, I think, comes in a very powerful way. Because art is beyond words. It goes to emotions, it goes to feelings, it touches at a different level. And only later we try to rationalize it and try to explain to ourselves. But actually, a lot of the art is just unexplainable. It just touches us directly. And in a lot of my professional work, we try to talk a lot about, for example, how do we make others hear us? How do we reach out across lines? How do we make invisible visible? And again, this is art that can do that in so many ways. And coming to empathy, they say empathy is a gateway, compassion is the path. To me, empathy is a very important starting point, because first of all, it stops us at the judging point. When we feel empathy, when we acknowledge empathy in ourselves, that's a starting point for non-judgment. It's opening to seeing through eyes of others, hearing others' suffering. But then the next step to me still, we need to have compassion to be able to go further and to recognize feelings of others, to acknowledge it, not just by understanding, but as art does, going further in feelings. And empathy and compassion to me are probably the only way that we can start humanizing ourselves again, being recognizing that most of us have more in common than differences, that we have more in really, like, we have the same desires, but for some reason we sometimes want it at the expense of others. And that's where, again, empathy and compassion can help us to understand what is acceptable, what is not, no, to understand boundaries. And of course, empathy and compassion together build that path to switching attention from my own pain, my own need, my own egocentric desire, or my acute pain, and recognize pain, the same level of pain in others, recognize desires in others, and start building open shared space for acknowledging not only my own needs and desires and pain, but also others. And that's the opening for peace building. That's how the peace process can start. Then one more thing, I think your project needs to go to the decision-making level, because that's where the gap is. You know, at the moment, I think it's like when we talk in macro economy, there is often in modern world, often like human dimension is not there. A lot of global decisions, they don't really include a human being. And that's what we need to change. And again, it can be changed only through empathy, compassion, through the tools of the art. Thank you.
Thanks. So compassion, empathy for the other side, and then ultimately humanity. And art, in a way, speaks to all of these. So I want to go to the two artists on the panel. Maybe, Gregor, to you first. You're a digital artist. So talk a little bit about how digital artists can defeat cynicism through emotional connection, but also the possible role for co-creation, which is really at the core of this project.
Hello, can you hear me properly?
We can.
Hi, thanks for the invitations, first of all, and also thanks for all the topics that are being talked, because I think we could do a panel for 2 or 3 hours for each topic. And first of all, let's say that how can I summarize all my thoughts? Because about digital art, I involved since I am very young, since teenager, because despite I am from Spain, I am from the rural place in Spain, Galicia, isolated, never had chance to galleries and this kind of access to art. So since very young age, I understood and realized about the shift of paradigm we are living with the internet. Because nowadays, let's say that internet and the web is a reflection of real life, and at the same time, real life can be shaped through the web. But this is a complex thing, because if we don't understand how the web works, and neuromarketing and psychopolitics and all these topics, maybe we are just pieces of a machine that we are not realizing we have been part of. So from my point, I try to use digital art. Just light is something I usually say, because it's the only raw matter I use, to try to bring awareness and to create some thoughts inside people's minds that I try not to dichotomize, because when we speak about politics and social problems, you make people take a position, and I don't like this. I prefer to speak deeper and about the international and national and even personal, because at the very end, we are all, as Marina said, we are all the same. You know, metaphorically, we are all canvas, different canvases when we are born, but we are canvas at the end. So we have all the same emotions and the same feelings, and despite the countries or our personal tastes, but at the very end, we are all humans. And I don't think, you know, anybody is born hating others. You know, this is something that is developed over time. And we must be very careful about the web, because the web is a machine that causes more hate than love, you know, because it's very easy being hateful behind a screen. And I say this because when I meet people in real life that online they seem hateful, and, you know, and this kind of, lately they are lovely and they are nice. So I try to, how can I explain? We can't forget that, for example, the role in art in history, since we were in caves until now, the same in the Middle Ages, art was a tool to convey ideas and to, in some way, manipulate minds and to make people think one thing or another. And I think people that is involved in crypto art and blockchain can see that some people try to make other people think as they want, and this can create a lot of noise. And so I try to do it with my arts. I focus a lot on loops and gifs because I consider them meditative and, you know, to reflection. And it's a way of, maybe I am wrong, but I only trust in art, in the way of making people change or feeling more awareness about the world, because it's when we read a book or we watch a film or a music, we are not thinking about the country or about who has made it. It's only a personal touch that make us elevate. For me, art must make us feel elevate, not stupid. And from my point of view, nowadays we are in a boiling, distorted era of art where you know, a lot of abstract art and glitches and noises, and it's a reflection of our times. Of course, it's said that art is a reflection of our times, and our times are, you know, boiling, distorted, glitchy. So I try to convey some ideas that are more figurative but meditative, with the idea that when people watch them, they can enter a meditative state in their mind, so they can stop and reflect. And the same is that I use GIFs. It's a format that is relatively young. It's only 30 years old. And I used it because when you're scrolling in the web, you know, the doom scrolling, that you see a lot of, you know, sex and pain and fights, and suddenly you stop in a oasis of motion that you can stop and reflect. So maybe it's my perception, but I feel like we are all in a cave. Each of our computers are a cave, and from this cave we can send messages only with light. So I think it's very early to maybe to realize about that, but we are living 4 different, let's say, humans on Earth now. That is, our grandparents were born without internet and they will die without totally understanding it. Our parents were born without internet and they are understanding a bit internet. Now there is our generation that we are the only generation in human race that was born with internet and grew up with internet. And the next generation, that are the youngest one, they are already born inside the internet. So there is it's a collision between generations. So it's very hard to understand each other when we came from different paradigms. So this is what I'm trying with my art. That actually my art is just let's say, excuse, of trying to explain my philosophy of how I see the world and how this paradigm work. And overall, there is a thing that I think every day, that I don't understand how people can be hateful between countries and races when we are using the same internet. You know, it's like, there is only one frontier nowadays, that is the internet. Of course, each country has its culture and idiosyncrasy and all this, but at the very end, we are all sharing the same screen. So I only trust in art about this, because for me, when I was younger, involved in politics, and I discovered that it creates dichotomies and a lot of fights, most times between people on the same side. So this is why I try to, I don't speak directly about politics, but there is a lot of politics in my work, because when you speak about politics in the audience, it generates a kind of membrane that makes them position. And I don't like people get position. But when you go further in the people's mind is when people can maybe start to see things without this layer. So I just trust on, let's say my headline about this is just, I just trust on art about a change. And I hope that step by step and young generations understand the internet as a whole country. And of course, I wish we could change the world with a tweet, that we can write something in tweet to stop wars or whatever. People only want to be in peace. People only want to have their money to make a living. Nobody wants wars. So I wish this Lord of the Wars fight them in a room and leave us, in peace to make our art and our lives. So I will keep doing what I do because I trust on what we do, and even more now with the blockchain technology that people from all around the world, from rich and poor countries, can take part on this. And I really trust in this paradigm. It's been hard, of course, but change of paradigms are always hard and disruptive. But the good point is that there is no way back. The shift has begun.
Exactly. Thanks. So I want to go to Yu now, because I mean, your art is intrinsically connected to empathy and social purpose, especially building empathy across communities, including LGBTQ communities. So talk a little bit about your art and the power of empathy in art.
So hello everyone, my name is Yu, and thank you so much for having me. So I think that it's just long story short, because I'm born and raised in Taiwan, and I moved to Germany 10 years ago. And I realized even in the Western world, and as a queer Asian person living in the Western world, there's a lot of things I cannot really express, especially with the language barrier. And there's a lot of social injustice I cannot just directly to say out loud, and I don't have the outlet. So I start to use my art to create the visual, and use my visual as kind of a statement, and in a way like a protest, like the previous panelists have mentioned, is like a protest to share my message. And throughout the process, I actually realized that, okay, as an artist, as a creator, I have the privilege to use my tool and as a platform to share the message. And I also learned from the process that I can actually reflect my experience as a queer person to practice empathy in a way, to understand so many people from so many different backgrounds that have suffered in a different pain, even though I don't understand, but we share the same unfortunate experience in a way. So I always feels like, okay, empathy need time to practice, and especially through art and practice. And you can learn and start to grow the understanding between different community. And that's why I feel the power of art and creation is so important. And also the art is beyond language barrier. And I cannot tell because for example, I really cannot express myself clearly in English as my second language, but I'm confident to use my art to put a message out there. And especially in nowadays society, the internet is so fast, you receive so much information, and people now being trained to instantly have the debate when they read something or when they hear something through text. But I think from art is the most mild and subtle way to start a conversation, because you visually receive the work. Maybe the first reaction is anger, but you take time to understand the message behind it. And I think it's the best way to trigger people to think and then start a conversation. It doesn't matter which message you are sharing. It doesn't matter, because people use art to share the message. They have their own agenda. It's a freedom. But I think it's the best way to slowly understand and not like I have to react instantly. So that's why I realized the power of art, and I understand the power as an artist. And because throughout the past 10 years as an artist, I always feels like I don't want to do art just as the decoration, because art holds so much power. And as a human being, that's our duty to create something that means something. And that's our legacy as a human being. And we inspire, we get so many inspiration from life. It's not just, I want to create something beautiful. It should be something meaningful. So that's my thought. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, but thank you so much for having me.
No, well, as you said, your art speaks for itself. So, Minhyun, you're a curator. Talk a little bit about, as you curate shows, how empathy and the empathy that art fosters has human power and political power as well.
Hi, Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for the introduction first. So I'm Min, as introduced. I'm a curator, especially these days interested in decentralization and critical reading of AI colonialism. And first, like talking about this piece, what a strange coincidence it is that we're discussing peace today, especially given the current, things just happened a few hours ago in the world. I think as an artist, as an art practitioner and curator and organizer, I find myself asking more urgently than ever, like, what can art really do in such turmoil? And for the past 10 years, I've been running international artist residency programs and also running an independent art and tech our tech society festival for 4 years. So through them, I've witnessed like countless moments of this serendipity, encounters, empathies, artists, how they're arriving in a new environments, how they develop their ideas and, refining their skills and stuff. But as inspiring as this be, and I want to be positive as possible, but as inspiring as this be, I must say it's not always ideal, because collaboration is hard and empathy is a difficult thing. We all want that, but I just wanted to make sure that's just not easy. And finding ideas that truly respond to a struggling society takes immense effort and commitment. So I think I've witnessed that for the last 10 years, and especially I think a lot about those in the time right now when when there's a war about to start. And the fact that we're even talking about peace building means quite plainly that peace has not been built yet, or it's being built. And for many years, I think artists have proposed alternative, radical, even revolutionary visions. But the world, it seems, is too busy maintaining its like neoliberal authoritarian systems. And honestly, I don't believe in like naive hope that art alone can make the world more peaceful. But that belief, and sometimes it feels like, we're failing every time, but that does not mean that we should just simply wait and passive and, at the shoreline of the sunset. So I think, especially today, it takes real collective power to make our voices heard, especially when there can be so many, it can be it can be buried in social networks, fake news, AI generated content. Like the technologies we are using right now are owned by the powerful people. And then if we are to resist, we must not like we don't want to use technology, but we must like reclaim the very tools that's been taken away from us. So I know it sounds grand, and it is, but it requires more energy, more solidarity, a deeper kind of co-creation, as the title suggests. And the co-creation here means, of course, co-creation empathy means sharing, and I think it challenges the traditional idea of artistic authorship, where artist alone holds all the rights. So I made this artwork, it's mine. That's the kind of traditional idea of artistic authorship. But I feel like this whole idea of empathy and co-creation is challenging that. For some, like I know for some people it raises concerns about copyright, but I think co-creation is not about like giving up ownership, but I think it's about distributing knowledge, building collective skill, and opening up real communication. So, and this cannot rest on shoulders of one artist or practitioner. It demands organizations like you guys that can support, frame, and enable the platform that nurtures shared creation. And especially modern technology, AI, demand sort of unintentional collective labor that we did not sign up for. They collect our data, collaborative development we do, and social sharing. So ironically, these very technology also make sharing easier, faster, and more playful. So my question is that, can we use this technology differently? Can we turn this into our tool, our weapon, instead of bombing a city? Can artists come together to co-create through empathy something that reveals what is missing from these systems? Can creative minds carve out the alternative within the tools that now dominates us? And if we can find a leeway while still using this technology. So I think if we can achieve that, I think it'll be a great sharing co-creation and sharing empathy for all of us. And asking these questions, these are big questions, but I feel like empathy and co-creation is a journey to find these answers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
No, those are exactly the questions that we're hoping to answer through this initiative. And your emphasis on co-creation is really the key. And I want to acknowledge your point that it's not easy, that it's hard, and we're not naive. I mean, I'm a former diplomat, and negotiating peace is hard. It's very hard. But as we come out of this panel, there are two metaphors, one from Gregor, one from you, our artists, that I think are really powerful. Gregor said that human beings are like a canvas. And so just as an artist paints on a canvas, in a way, war, violence, hatred fills the canvas with ideas, messages that we're trying to counteract, not least in the digital space. So if we presume that people in conflict zones are a canvas, then we have the opportunity to fill that canvas with something better and more hopeful, and art can play that role. And then you talked about another metaphor, which is that art is a shared language. You mentioned that whether it's English or it's another language, people in conflict zones often speak different languages. They come from different cultures. And so in that sense, it's that notion of art as a shared language across those barriers of actual language or actual culture, actual conflict that are especially powerful. And that's why Alyona and I and those of us who've organized this project, Art MISTICE, believe it's so powerful and believe that art has such a unique role to play. So thank you. It's inspiring, and it's really at the core of this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, hi again, everybody. Thank you for the previous panelists, for your speeches and your ideas, just inspiring us. And you're totally right, we're not naive. We understand that it will be very hard, like very, very hard, especially in nowadays world. Anyway, we're going to try and to conquer this narrative and to spread it, like again, digital art peacebuilding. And I have amazing panelists with me today. So my good friend, Simon Ross, so he's from Austria and he's an amazing person. He just helps a lot of artists from different conflict zones to cooperate and somehow to communicate, even in a nowadays world. Alex Cervantinos, a curator, amazing curator with a lot of experience, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Sahana Udupa, a scholar and a person who is researching, and I am sure will answer the question, what is digital dignity and how we can use some tools to fight pain and division and isolation in digital domain. And Yanni Lee, a curator also, who will, I am sure, answer the question, are we totally naive or we can do something useful and hopefully effective? So, okay, I am going to ask Simon, as he's with us, and he was just participating in like more or less similar event, but not in terms of co-creation, but in terms of digital art in an awful world that we experience nowadays. Simon, question for you. So digital art is the new way of communicating with young generation and with also a lot of people, no matter what country they are. How do you think, how can we co-create, cooperate through the digital art tool? What mistakes do you want to highlight, not to repeat or not to make during this initiative, Art MISTICE? Oh, Simon, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation. straight to the point. I just come out of a jury of a project that is inviting artists from around the world, artists at risk. It's also organized with the association Artists at Risk, and it's an international call inviting artists in a dangerous situation to propose their artworks to be shown and to receive an award. And what I see that is interesting in this context is that basically I think it's very important to use digital spaces, digital ways of communication as a tool to learn about artists that are potential participants in the project. Because especially when you talk about artists who are living or working in the context of conflict zones or generally at risk, then I think it is very important how to get to the persons you want to deal, because you need somehow to have a network that makes that brings you to the artists you want to work with. Because when you have somebody, I don't know, with Ukrainian artists living in the war zone, or we had, I don't know, LGBT artists now from Venezuela. I was seeing hundreds of works discussing the whole day today, and these artists, you need somehow to make them be part of what you do. So I think that this is a very important point to consider when you start this project, and to be open to artists who can then in collaboration with others and in a certain manner, like, I don't know, digital art, to get them involved. But you need to get through to them. You need to make them get involved, to have to put the confidence into your project. And I think that's one point. And then I think it's also important to find ways to create digital art, or to use digital means, but to be open to artists who work in a huge in different techniques. That's very important, because, for example, today I I was working with an incredible person who is already elderly artist from Congo, who is creating sculptures. And this what he's doing is a very risky thing, because he is under the threat of radical Islamistic persons, and so this is a very political way of creating artworks. Yes? And I think, but you can have also textile artists, or you can have performance artists. Again, have all kind of artists, but what is beautiful is to find ways to translate sometimes very traditional art forms into convincingly into a digital space. I think that could be a beautiful thing to do.
I have a second question for you, Simon. Have you ever experienced the situation where the artists from digital or from different conflict zones, they couldn't be on stage together because of the lack of not just empathy, but maybe pain that they experienced, and then their emotional frustration? Maybe you can share some stories with us.
Yeah, I mean, I can share that when a person has kind of endures or suffers from some injury, yes, a psychological injury, a traumatic situation, I think it's very it's very important to take the time to really deal with a person. Yes? It is as of writing like an open call is super good. But when you kind of say, I want to work with somebody, you need really to understand the person. Why do I say this? Because you need to understand the person in order to understand whether you can, I don't know, match it with another person. Yes? So I had today, for example, again today, because I was so impressed by this thing, I had two, a person, a male Palestinian artist, who is a poet actually, and he is writing a novel where he's like reflecting on the friendship with Israeli and Palestinian people. It's like I was immediately thinking of your project when I was reading this artistic proposal, because it's like ideal. Yes. But I mean, I was reading it. It's incredibly touching that a person can have such a generosity and mind to propose, to really think something like this when you are under threat and in the midst of such a thing. And I have an extent experience with artists, so Ukrainian and Russian artists. And the answer to this, you can't, like, there is no like rule. You need to figure this out with each person individually. But in like I have seen it a lot with Ukrainian and Russian artists, it is rare that you find somebody who is like really ready to engage in a kind of direct cooperation. But it is moving. These things are changing, and you find such people, but it is quite some, I think from organizational point, it is an investment, but it should encourage you and not like say it's not something to do. It is absolutely something to do, but it needs a lot of care and investment into people. And when you discuss with 10 people, perhaps you find 2, but that should be good. Then you will need to discuss with 100 person, and then you will get 5, but then it's something extraordinary. But you never can push people. That is the thing, is when you see that you feel anyway a person, whether it's a person is ready for something like this or not, and then it is then you see it. But there are also some kind of different fields of art. For example, at art universities, what I see in Austria, for example, there are some art universities that create an environment where young art students see or learn or get used that it is nice that they find a way to live together. Yes, and that, I don't know, studying together in one university is a higher value than to kind of hate each other. But this is like this is very. It's really, I think, a lot of question of research. But there are more and more so kind of points and places and spaces where you find such places. Also, I can really say, especially from the Ukrainian Russian, from the Ukrainian Russian topic, that these spots become more. Yes? But yeah, so it's a beautiful work and a real challenge.
Yeah, it is very complicated. Thank you, Simon. So I want to ask Alex, because Alex, you're a curator and you're focusing on empathy-driven digital art and trauma narratives. So taking into account what Simon just said, how can we change or switch hatred and maybe inability to create, co-creation and trauma healing?
Thank you for having me, first of all. I think my experience, because I've been working with artists for over a decade, and I have been working digitally for the past 4 years. I think there's a big issue when it comes to digital space, and that don't have a direct contact with each other. We're becoming avatar, reducing the human aspect that creates empathy in the first place. In real life, empathy comes from experiencing somebody else's pain. And to experience things and feel things through digital space, it's much harder than doing it when you're actually with a person. And at Tech, we try to do creation digitally compared to doing creation in a physical space where people are together, and there is this, the ideas are dropping on each other in real time. In digital, it's becoming much harder. Then people can get way more absorbed into their own preconceptions of what this might be. And the brainstorming station is much different. So I feel the more time, even though I used to be a really strong advocate of digital spaces, I'm also millennial. We're the first generation of social media. We build social media to what it is today because we were like, okay, we can connect with everybody across the world. And all those things are true. As it was mentioned in the previous panel, social media are controlled algorithmically by certain oligarchs all around the world. We don't really have control over. Even though these tools are very important and they're very strong, the means that we can use in connecting with each other. At the same time, I think we need to get back to our roots, which is human relationships in real time, in real life, where empathy can be built. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, but I have a strong question for you. Is it possible in our world, especially with the help of digital art, to just bring this empathy or just to make it powerful and to unite the whole community, to share this experience and to make it trendy and sexy? I mean, this is a key issue. If something is controlled by oligarchs, everything is controlled by oligarchs, as we know, in the world, which is at war constantly, we can change it only with the collective actions. Can we somehow bring a lot of artists, digital artists, with the help of digital art to make something collectively, especially if they live in the conflict zones where they feel like another person is their enemy, for example, due to what's going on now?
I think the digital space, digital art, has very strong advantage, which is that it can be instant to anywhere in the globe. And that is the thing real-time events or exhibitions or institutions cannot really provide. At the same time, I feel for this to be successful, that people have worked in a way on their empathy, on their empathetic skills. You need to have done a certain level of work to be able to engage digitally and have this open-mindedness to approach any issue, empathy and understanding and conversation, and not with social media sort, which is just reaction, instant debate, black and white. Those arrangements that have gone now for almost 20 years, we are already in the older generations of internet. So we have Generation Z and Generation Alpha that is growing up now, which are growing up with art that is very, very different. A lot of them don't even understand how an institutional exhibition awards or how a conversation really happens in real time. So I think it makes a lot of work in both areas for us to be able to fully utilize the potential digital space brings us, which is this globalization and instantness of the information, while at the same time we are acknowledging our empathy, which needs to be built on a more personal level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Alex, thank you so much. It makes sense. So to remind everyone who is watching, this is a QR code with our manifesto, with all the principles. You can scan this QR code and read the manifesto and sign it. Please, please, please. We need your help to do what we are going to do. And as you see, it's like there are a lot of pros and cons, and it's a very complex and complicated stuff, but we are going to change it. So I have a question for Sahana. Sahana is a researcher of digital conflict and dignity and narrative warfare. So from your perspective, what practical tools, narrative patterns, or campaign strategies can artists use to shift online culture toward empathy and co-creation?
So today's extreme speech ecosystem has a global playbook. So there are cross-cutting patterns and tropes, so much so that the same derogatory expression is often seen in different parts of the world. For instance, the word normie. Normie is someone who takes everything seriously and does not get the joke. So it is an insult word for politically correct social justice advocates. In a troll attack, we found a panoply of labels: leftist, globalist, multiculturalist, far left, narcissistic, Stalinist, pseudo-liberals, libtards. Libtards are liberal retards. So when you get into digital research, and especially researching hateful language, you are also bombarded with these hateful expressions. And the troll attack that I mentioned was actually against an academic. Some of the well-meaning concepts that emerged after years of struggle are turned into pejorative terms, tinged with sarcasm and experienced as fun, especially through memes. In fact, fun and hilarity are the motors of extreme speech globally. Therefore, digitally enabled exclusionary politics is first and foremost about new styles and resources for communicating the unsayable. This is the kind of bare knuckles approach to speech that social media has systematically encouraged and profited from. And these emotional architectures of fun and also fear and the colloquial styles in which these are wrapped on social media are today systematically harnessed and manipulated by a new sector called digital political marketing. They're also disinformation for hire sector. They're ready to offer hateful speech and disinformation as a paid service to political parties, politicians, even state actors. They again operate on a global scale, also for information warfare among nation states. So we therefore call this a global conjuncture of extreme speech. It's a conjuncture of actors, affordances, and practices. And social media has offered a connective tissue for this conjuncture. And today, generative AI is coming in handy to craft incendiary content in quick time. So what we are facing today is a global challenge. What we see in global north context today in terms of social media, abusive cultures, intimidation, and subsequent ambitions to control knowledge beyond social media spaces is something that we have been documenting in other parts of the world for at least a decade now. And there are, of course, specific regulatory directions that we need to take so that media systems deliver good things of communication without materially depending on polarizing narratives, half-truths, and naked lies. And that's a completely different intervention. But how can art come to our rescue? And that is the primary concern in this meeting. Because today's digital hate builds on so-called artistic expressions of fun and memes, we need to intervene in these spaces very specifically in digitally native terms and formats. We may call this digital vernacular art for pro-social narratives. When a troll attack is taking place, for instance, how do we build up resources of intervention, not only to undo bystander complicity, but also in creative ways to undo hate that comes coded as fun? And these are proximate artistic interventions. When I say proximate, it means that they stay close to actual online interactions and specific digital formats and platform subcultures. And it also should reach out to disinformation peddlers. And they are doing it to earn a livelihood. So it's not just the victims that need to be addressed through art, but it should also be addressing the producers of hate. I would also say that these proximate cultural artistic productions should stay close to local tropes that are mobilized in a hate attack. Art should resonate with local repertoires. Yet, there is something to be said about the capaciousness of art as an expression of the human condition. And I think that came in the previous presentations as well. I do believe that art on a human scale and the planetary scale of human and more than human interrelatedness, the profound ecological relationality of our being is very vital. So art has two different dimensions as I see it. One is very specific, very local, at the same time opening up the capaciousness of our being. So finally, studies also show that distinct genres of art and music have become the vehicle of hateful cultures. Anthropologists have documented radical right-wing musical creations and practices in the Nordic region, for instance. And one of my students did a thesis on how popular musical genres are appropriated by the far right in Germany for anti-immigrant illiberal agendas. So when I played country music rather casually and not in any research setting, one of my interlocutors immediately asked me to shut it down because for her, it instantly triggered associations of far-right musical scenes. So here we see different expressions. There is dystopia, that our land is collapsing because of immigration, but there is also what Zygmunt Bauman calls retrotopia, and these are visions located in the lost, stolen, abandoned, but undead past, which means there is the aspiration to revive a pristine past. In right-wing circles, we've been documenting generative AI images that evoke this longing for, and also subsequently the political promise of a happy land with authentic cultures where no other people are there. So, although some of these insurgencies and appropriations are still marginal, we should stay clear in our vision. We should not only reclaim digital space, but also reclaim art. Art is not only a coping mechanism, as I see it, but a way to reset the terms of our engagement. And I think your initiative, Armistice, is much needed and very timely. I hope to be associated with this in the coming days. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Sahana. Ian Lee, I have a question for you as a curator. So what do you think, especially in terms of the topic that we're discussing nowadays, and as a young generation representative, how can we involve more young people to cooperate, even if they are in the conflict zones in a digital domain through the digital art nowadays? And will we be successful? What pros and cons can we face with, and how do you think we can solve these issues?
Thank you for having me. I hope I'm sounding okay. Just to confirm, is it all right?
You sound good. Yeah, we are trying to fix the issues with Sahana.
Okay. Actually, I have a little bit of a experience myself to share. So a few years ago, around the pandemic time, that I co-founded a digital art and electronic music festival in Taiwan. This is because what we wanted to do is that to bring people, because we were in the pandemic time, right? And we spend most of our time online, and we want to bring people to, like a dance floor, so that we could kind of get to interact with each other and view art together. And so this is something that I had done before, and lots of young people joined in. And I think young people having fun is part of what they want. So creating a fun scenario or like a very lively event, it's always a great way to attract young people to join as well. I also, from this experience, I think about like curating as a way to build digital communities. And this way, when we using curating to create digital community, we actually may have a chance to reclaim digital space for more empathy, actually. Actually, during the quarantine time, digital art works actually flourished everywhere. So had like NFTs and decentralized autonomous organizations as well. So together with this festival that was set in pandemic time, I hosted an online virtual galleries on Hub by Mozilla. It's a web VR site, and we had open calls for our exhibitions online as well. So actually many young artists who didn't have much access to institutions, resources, or who couldn't travel, or who didn't have much of the material, or who are like trapped in their homes, are able to join and share what they have created during the pandemic time with us. So we also ask artists to work as a digital architect to build like virtual spaces to host selected artwork in a virtual gallery. And in the space, we could teleport to different rooms and we could fly together to see art. And that's where the magic happens because, for example, I host a tour for a crypto community with people logging in from all over the world. They are crypto holders. They actually never interacted in this way. So we were, like a group of avatars logging in from like Vietnam, the Philippines, Sweden, and Taiwan, flying through these like bizarre virtual world that artists had created and chatting via text and voices. So most of the online gallery at the time were replica of real spaces, and we didn't want to do it that way. So we want to embrace the characteristic of digital space. So one of which is that you find most of the materials free, and computing is related to the size of the digital objects, which is also image qualities that actually contributes to the constraints to build virtual galleries, which is very different, somehow similar, but very different from like hosting an exhibition in a museum setting or gallery setting. So it's a very different mindset. And I think it's something that's really interesting. But the best part is to be able to make it accessible for everyone just with a link share, and everyone can just logging in. And so after the tour, actually, we all gather around for a group selfie. And it's a snapshot of our avatars with our usernames floating above our heads. So this like internet selfie is a really beautiful memory for me. So yeah, this is something I think it would be really fun, just by inviting artists or creators who want to join in, to show their work. And engage with them and show them to other people, other communities who may have interested in art but didn't have much access to it, in a setting that's crazy, that's like bizarre, and I think that's a way to actually bring very different sets of community to meet each other. And actually, this manifesto and this initiative is very inspiring for me. And I think this intervention presented a great opportunities for digital artists to have artworks and projects to build on for like deeper conversations with online communities. Because actually as what we can see now, many of the museums, like the institutions, even though on the curatorial text wall, you can see that they want to imagining a new world, but all these new worlds only exist in museums, only exist in white cubes. And we can also see many institutions unable to respond to the demand from the public in terms of rejecting questionable funding resources, and they were censoring artists who has like conflict interest with their donors and boards. So while imagined a real world can imagine world and real world could exist independently from each other, maybe we could make it collide, and maybe this is what digital space will start to be, such a space. And I think this is also like a very exciting time for artists who work in the digital field. I wanted to reference a philosopher called Yu Kui on generative images. So what he talks about is about artificial imagination is mostly image-based, or something that could be turned into data. But this actually calls for a re-elaboration on aesthetic education. So what he suggests is that the aesthetic work could be something that can disappear or can be figured out, or art that offers more than image making. And I think the last one, art offers more than image making, is what I want to propose to digital artists who resonate with peacemaking purposes. This is also reminds me of the first panel where Manali's talking about art that makes people experience of freedom and experience the possibility of peace, which is artistic imagination. I think that's what artists are capable to do. And how does it is it possible to work? I wanted to reference another writer that I really enjoy. It's Rebecca Solnit. Her work called Hope in the Dark, saying that hope is a powerful tool for change in uncertain time. And also Dr. Jane Goodall's recent message to urge people to be hopeful. These are not just aspiring, but also actionable. Like, you don't have to solve every issue. You just pick a category and work on it. I think there are so much things artists can do as long as they are given opportunity, as long as they're given support. They can create art projects that help people to regain their agencies, engage in direct dialogues, or archiving diasporic experiences, making erased history visible, or to introduce incoherence, introducing glitch to hate speech. You know, like to introducing incoherence to hate speech that's try to make everything the same. That's why like the extreme rights want people to go back to their country. That's why they don't want different culture to exist. That's why they want to put immigrants in their spaces. But what we want is to reject and to interrupt this kind of coherence behavior by introducing incoherence. And as a curator, I think this initiative is actually quite inspiring. So I think it's also show curators a new scope to work with. Like, I definitely think we need more curators to work with diverse interests, backgrounds, and missions to create multiple communities in digital spaces. And curators' roles, I would argue that it's not just about researching or contextualizing artwork anymore, but to be the person that holds the belief together, care for artists' creative intuition and sensibility. And in this context, I think believing peace is in the making. It's bringing thinking materials and observation to each of their artist communities. Very last, I also want to say that it's also okay to take a break. When you start something online, it doesn't have to stay there forever. Actually, many DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization, are also finishing after they complete a certain stage of goal they set. It doesn't have to last forever, and it could be a node that's documented on blockchain, which could fork into different directions based on its community's decision. So I'm saying this so we don't have to adapt to this growth mindset or go back to this accumulative logic of capitalism. This could be a very dynamic, evolving, temporary, which could be more relaxing for anyone who's a community organizer. And I think relaxation goes a long way. So yeah, I think it's possible to reclaim digital space for empathy, and definitely as long as you invite young people, as long as you support them, which is what this initiative is planning to do. I'm very looking forward to it. I think people will come.
Oh, thank you, Yanili. Thank you. You're amazing. Amazing speech. Okay, so to wrap up, thank you, everybody, for sharing your views and inspiration. And I hope you'll be with us. And again, I want to remind that this QR code on your screens is devoted to our manifesto. You can scan QR code and read the manifesto and sign it and spread it all over. Thank you, guys. And we'll move into our next panel. Thank you so much. Again, our next panel is here, and we have an amazing guest, Shaman Ali. Correct me if I am wrong with the pronunciation. An amazing person, Jewish Muslim, and who is advocating for dialogue, cooperation, that empathy, co-creation, and so on. So, Shame, can you tell us your story and highlight, because it's an ongoing conflict that we are facing now? You're working exactly in this area for many years. So I wanted to talk more about what can we do now with the help of art, and especially with the help of our project, to reclaim this empathy and to unite people, not to divide them. Thank you.
Great questions, and thank you for having me, Alina. My name is Shama Mishtali, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. So although I do a lot of different things, all rooted in building positive peace in the world, whether in policy or diplomacy, I do identify first and foremost as an artist, as a creative. Art was my first professional identity, which allowed me to explore and understand my own identities and sort of my place in the world. And I'll explain why. So I was born and I grew up in Casablanca, Morocco. My father is Jewish, my mother is Muslim. It took me a long time to actually really sit with those identities, those histories, those cultures, to really understand who I am and why I was drawn to art in the first place from a young age, and why I was really kind of taken to the canvas to represent identities and cultures and legacies and histories and narratives that were just totally ignored and misrepresented or overlooked, specifically in the Middle East and North Africa. So I started from a young age, essentially really using art for activism, painting portraits of Jewish and indigenous women from North Africa and the Middle East, and really seeking to kind of bridge the gaps in narratives which I felt and thought were essential in actually creating an environment of dialogue, a foundation for understanding, a foundation for humanizing the other. And so, I mean, interestingly, I would have a lot of people who'd come to the exhibitions and see these portraits of Jewish women, and these people would be from like immigrant Muslim communities in the US or in Europe, and they would say, how did you get a picture of my grandmother? And I would say, well, but she's Jewish. And so something would kind of start to unravel in them, and that something is that wall of otherness and dehumanization that they had built through years of propaganda and misinformation and media manipulation. And that wall would start to kind of dissipate a little bit. And then it would prompt them to ask even more questions and to do sort of their own research. And I think that's the power of art, specifically art that bridges between cultures, is that it kind of sets the environment for a very empowered process for the individual that comes into contact with that artwork, in the sense that I'm not telling you what to do, I'm not telling you what to think, but I'm getting you started on a process in which you start to question what you've been made to believe, and then you're empowered to do that research on your own and to continue that conversation, and sort of take that work of peace building and bridge building forward on your own. Now, I've done a lot of different or I guess used a lot of different methods and media and ways to kind of bridge these narratives. And as I mentioned, my work really kind of spans policy, diplomacy, art and culture, and media. I've also started a whole company in the UAE that makes jewelry inspired by Moorish design and architecture as a way to bring cultures together and to tell a story of human civilization, really, and what happens when cultures interact with one another, when we have an environment that can actually allow for cultural exchange. And the result is that we have hubs for innovation. We have hubs for civilizational progress. And so I draw from the example of Andalusia, of Sepharad, and the example of Moorish history and architecture as a way to allow people to visualize that language of cross-pollination, of different cultures really coming together to create something greater. And I found that to be really a great metaphor for metropolitan cities like Dubai or New York City. And I find that that language really resonates most with third culture kids, people who are in the borderlands, people who I call edge walkers. And in fact, I have a talk on this concept of edge walkers that I did in Dubai Expo at the Israeli Pavilion, where I unveiled my first digital art, which was an NFT at the time. And so I've always kind of really tried to use any media, any tool as a way to create avenues for dialogue. And that's what took me to this digital art space. I had gotten into, someone mentioned COVID times and, people kind of sort of transitioning or exploring different media. But during COVID, I really kind of got into the rabbit hole of decentralizing technologies and blockchain and Bitcoin. And then through that, I saw the potential of the democratization of art. And I thought, my God, this is an amazing tool, an amazing technology. If only we can get as many artists as possible to leverage these tools as a way to tell those stories and spread those narratives that unfortunately we don't have in our education system. We don't have in a media that has been really compromised and hijacked by extremist ideologies and narratives. And I think Sahana mentioned earlier or alluded to these ideologies that are really stifling this idea or this concept of cultural production. And so I'm glad you're bringing me into the space. I'm happy to kind of respond to as many questions as possible. But one thing that I want to say is, since you are building this incredible new initiative to foster dialogue, is that there are really bad actors in the sort of space of culture and the arts who have been really blinded by ideology, as I mentioned. And instead of allowing for art and for spaces of culture to become these sacred sanctuaries where people can humanize each other, where they can finally have dialogue, especially if you're coming from conflicting narratives and cultures, where you can have a neutral ground of exchange and of humanizing, of recognizing each other's traumas and pains, etc. They've invested in creating more spaces of conflict, unfortunately, and they have been just weaponizing art as a way to push for certain ideologies. And this is not a new concept. During the Nazi regime, we had artists who were seen as artists by the Nazi regime, but they were in fact Nazi propagandists that really served extremism and fascism. And so we have to be really mindful of this, because we sit at a really interesting and dangerous time in human history where we're at the forefront of sort of the next stage of human civilization, where we have a rapid digitization, an accelerating, developing digital order that is unfolding. And so we're all kind of asking ourselves these big questions. But if we don't put our capital, our resources, and our human capacities into this digital age with moral clarity and with this intention of leveraging and fostering more empathy and more dialogue and more conflict, we are leaving the space totally void, totally empty for the more extremist fractions of society who leverage technology as a way to completely dismantle human civilization. So happy to take questions.
Yeah, I have the second question, I think, because of the time, maybe the last question, but a very important one. Do you think that nowadays, especially because, what is going on now, it is possible to foster a dialogue in Middle East between all countries who are involved in conflicts, and especially between artists? So I have an example. There is an initiative named Mother's Call. So there are mothers from Israel and Palestine who are calling for action to have a dialogue. So they started only when they were 5-6 people, and now there are thousands, tens of thousands of mothers calling for peace and a dialogue. And So I communicated with a lot of people who are in cooperation, and all of them told me it is very hard to learn right now because the conflict is an ongoing conflict. So I have a question to you. So do you really think it is not naive somehow to influence the peace building process when all these wars are ongoing?
So I think it's actually a responsibility. I don't think we have a choice. I think we should be creating those spaces more and more. I think, as I mentioned, unfortunately, we've had many organizations and even organisms and international NGOs that have really served the kind of divisive narratives a lot more, that have been really calling for boycotts and for division and separation and like the cessation, the rupture in dialogue. And that is really tragic, because unless we can get not to both side the conflicts, but unless we can get both cultures, both communities, and I don't mean by saying that, I don't mean Israelis and Palestinians, I don't mean Jews and Muslims or Arabs, but I really mean extremists and moderates. Unless we can get these parties to actually talk to each other, then we are not able to move forward. I'm very familiar with the initiative you mentioned. It's a really beautiful organization, and they were moved to do the work that they do out of severe pain. When you lose your loved ones, your son in war, and you decide that despite that pain, you are choosing dialogue, that there's something so beautifully human and resilient about that statement, about that process. Unfortunately, in the West and all over the world, when people are really disconnected from the conflict, meaning they don't have a direct stake in the conflict, and instead of modeling that empathetic behavior, they're actually just serving the divisiveness and the rupture in dialogue and narratives, then we're not aiding those people. We're not helping the conflict move in a positive direction. Now, to respond to your question, I'm involved with a couple of initiatives where sort of curating this whole process of bringing artists from across the Middle East and North Africa to create and to co-create and really set up not just spaces, but language processes of co-creation together. And we have been going through a lot of trials and tribulations over the last year and a half. I was actually supposed to wrap this project up a while ago, but again, we are navigating an ongoing conflict where a lot of emotions come to the surface, and when they do, you have to be able to give them space and create these like safe containers for those emotions to be processed. But the really important thing here is, unless we create those safe containers, which art and culture has the utmost potential to do, then we are leaving entire generations completely vulnerable to extremism. And you can see that all over. I mean, you see hateful graffiti art all over the big cities as a result of the conflict. And why do we see that? Because we don't have art spaces that can actually hold that grief, hold that pain, hold that trauma, and allow people to process it in a way that's constructive. I was just in Berlin a few days ago, and I was at the Jewish Museum there, and they had this really beautiful exhibition where people walking into the Jewish Museum to learn about Jewish history or to reconnect with German Jewish history. They have this beautiful installation where you can write messages on this like tree of peace or tree of life, and you can hang those messages. And there are a lot of messages completely related to the war. But when you do that, you give permission to people to express what they're holding inside. And that is critical to be able to move society in a positive direction towards what I call positive peace. And I insist on the concept of positive peace because we can be, again, naive and say, let's just have ceasefires let's just pause, the conflict, the confrontation, and let's just pretend that we have peace. That's not real peace, because then the cycle keeps getting restarted and restarted and restarted, and we don't break away from this cycle of violence and brutality. Positive peace is a process that, unlike negative peace, builds a foundation for sustainable long-term peace. And I really think we can't get there without art and culture. And that's why I'm extremely emotional and invested in continuing this work of really using art and culture and new media as a way to move us forward.
Thank you, Shama. Thank you so much for your inspirational speech. Yeah, have a good day, and thank you for sharing your expertise and your also emotions with us. It's highly important.
Thank you so much, Alina. Take care.
With that, and today we launch Artmistice. And as the two co-founders of this digital art peacebuilding initiative, and we hope movement, Leona and I are incredibly grateful to all of the artists, curators, peacebuilders, and cultural leaders who joined us, not just for this launch, but in the project. And we hope ordinary citizens worldwide will do so too. It sometimes feels like the world is on fire. And if you turn on your TV, or as one of the artists said earlier, you doom scroll the internet or your social media, it's easy to become cynical. But even though we know this is hard, we're not cynical. And what we heard today expresses very powerfully why we shouldn't be cynical. There's a QR code on the screen that links to a digital peacebuilding manifesto. It's built around the connections between peacebuilding, technology in the digital space, reclaiming the digital space, and ultimately through art. And you should look at it because it's built around a few principles that are really at the core of this initiative. As a diplomat, and I was an American diplomat, I'll tell you, as several of our speakers said, peace does not break out just because the fighting stops. Peace breaks out when empathy occurs across conflict lines. And so that principle is really at the core of this initiative, and it's at the core of this manifesto. Empathy is necessary for peace because we need to recognize the pain of the opposing side and then relate it to our own. And then the other principles follow from that. Co-creation comes from shared pain. And this initiative is built around collaborative creation by digital artists rooted in shared emotional truths. We really think digital art can bridge divides and maybe, in its way, transform hostility into mutual understanding. We think emotion can drive change because hatred isn't overcome by logic, but ultimately by emotion. And digital art is powerful and can powerfully build emotional bridges even among divided communities. We want to reclaim the digital space. And the digital space, by the way, has the advantage of mass scale and accessibility. Hate spreads digitally, and so peace has to spread digitally too. Digital art can reach across cultures, as you said, across languages and across borders. And I thought you made that point especially powerfully on the first panel. So ultimately, culture shapes perception. Art can transform consciousness, even where diplomacy can fail. And I say that as a former diplomat with all humility. So we hope that digital imagery, and especially when it's co-created, can rapidly shift public perceptions and move us toward peace. So Aliona will call us to action, but we want artists, curators, technologists, and all of you to join us in this endeavor. Aliona?
Yeah, thank you, Evan. And I want to express my gratitude to A.L. Greco for his amazing art that we've just seen. It was so inspiring for me. And, I've learned a few lessons from today's event. First is that everything is possible, despite the fact that we faced with a lot of, counter arguments that this initiative is very hard. Guys, it is very hard. It will be very hard to accomplish these goals. So what we've just heard is that everything is possible if we are involved and we are taking our actions and we collaborate with each other. This is my first lesson. And my second lesson is that digital art and digital domain itself can bring us together despite the fact what politicians are doing as a background and when the wall is falling apart. And I strongly believe in youth. This young generation can create something new that we are maybe nowadays even don't think about because we don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for such an inspiring event. Thank you, everybody who were with us, and please do something. Be the part of that project. Again, what we are going to do? First, we are going to launch the art residency, and we would like you to participate and to spread this open call through the communities, even if you don't think that it's possible, and even if you think that no one is going to participate, please help us to widespread this open call. Second, we have this manifesto, and again, it is not just about the words. We are going to launch a digital campaign. And what is digital campaign for us? We would like the narrative digital art peace building, again, to be sexy, trendy, and viral. So this is what we are fighting for, peacefully fighting for. And third, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we launched a fund. This is a community-driven fund. Why we did it? Not because we need money, but because we want everybody to share some actions and to do like the performances to say that, yes, I am not against the war just with my words. I am doing something, and this is what I am doing. So because everybody today said that, yeah, I believe that it is possible. I believe that it will come if we are acting together. So this is about collaborative and collective actions. Thank you so much again. And this is just the beginning. It was just the beginning. And we are so grateful and thankful that you were with us. And special thanks to our curator of this event. She's amazing, Irina. Thank you so much that you made it possible.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.